Candace Owens says she's sorry for the Islamophobia you've been through. Candace Owens doesn't worry about the jihadis who raped and slew. If you're watching, Candace Owens, give David and me a shout, because when it comes to jihad terror, you don't know what you're talking about. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That is the next Write a Poem Like It, or else you must acknowledge me as a prophet installment of the introductory text to This Week in Jihad. We have the great David Wood with us. Good morning, David.
Yo, what's up with you? You and the apostate prophet, man, just don't like Candace Owens.
I love Candace Owens. I love Candace Owens, and I wish all the best for her. And that is why I have to exercise a prophetic voice and speak about the errors that she is going into, David, because it would be remiss of me as a Christian individual to see her saying all these things and let it go by and say, oh, that's fine. You know, you think that Islam is wonderful and that the Jews are terrible and so on and so on. You know, it's just a responsibility that I feel like I have to try to bring Candace Owens and her followers, who I'm sure are all here watching tonight, back to the truth. And I thought that since she has made some new statements, that we could lead off with that. I don't know, did you see? I don't know if you mentioned that AP was talking about her, and I must confess that I'm not familiar with what you guys were saying. So you may know all about this already. I don't know, but did you see her latest?
No,
Okay, well,
I haven't seen anything from her for a long, long time.
Oh, okay. Well, just yesterday, that is March 5th, 2024 AD. Just yesterday, we had Candace Owens saying that she was sorry to Muslims for all the Islamophobia that they suffered after 9/11. Now, that's all very well, but she made a few statements in the course of that, David, that I had to take some issue with, however reluctantly. And so I'm going to quote her here. We can, don't I have, yeah, I have Candace here. Let's see. There she is. Candace Owens said, and I quote, "I want to say, just like to all Muslims growing up during that time in America, I am sorry on behalf of America for the way you were treated. That is so unacceptable. When I go back and re-examine that propaganda, that brainwashing that took place in the classroom to make me scared of something, I didn't even know what a Muslim was." Now what she's talking about is that she claims that she was beaten every day. She says beaten. I know what she means. Of course, she means beaten over the head. It was beaten into her. It was relentlessly emphasized that every Muslim was a terrorist. That's what she says happened in school to
Really,
her after 9/11.
where was this, Robert? Because all I remember is everyone in any position of authority telling you you're a racist Islamophobe if you think any of this has to do with Islam, and everyone up to and including the President of the United States proclaiming that Islam is a good, wonderful religion of peace and tolerance, and every media organization bending over backwards to get Muslim speaker after Muslim speaker after Muslim speaker on to show how not Islamophobic they were, and a wave of conversions to Islam because they gave Muslims so much time on mainstream media shows to preach Islam. That's what I remember.
That's what I remember too, David. And I also remember doing probably over 1,000 radio and television appearances in which people would say, "Now, we're not talking about all Muslims. You don't mean all Muslims, do you?" And I would have to say, I've had to say it so many times. And it's not that I really mind, because it's a true fact. But it's a true fact that everybody for years has demanded be emphasized and repeated over and over and over again. And that is, not all Muslims are terrorists. And so when I speak about the violent teachings of Islam, I am not speaking about all Muslims. And this is something that the only people like the Council on American Islamic Relations and the other Islamic apologists and advocacy groups, only they have claimed that any kind of discussion of Islam as having to do with terrorism means you're saying all Muslims are terrorists. But I have said that that does not mean that, and that not all Muslims are terrorists, literally thousands of times. So what's Candace on about?
I really don't know. I've never watched much of her, but I did not know her to be this completely insane. In fact, I never paid much attention. And then she interviewed Andrew Tate and was like fawning all over Andrew Tate, the sex trafficker, and now bending over backwards to win favor with Muslims. And what I've noticed most since the October 7th attacks is like the absolute utter hypocrisy. The exact same people who spent more than 2 decades constantly saying, don't associate what some Muslims do with all Muslims. Don't label all Muslims, which I've never done, you've never done. What we do is we show when people are committing terrorist acts, we show where it comes from in the Muslim sources. That's what we do. We trace the stuff back to Muhammad, and we say, of course, it doesn't mean all Muslims are doing this, doesn't mean all Muslims believe this, and so on. But the same people who've been lecturing us, condemning us for something we have never done for decades, are the same people who keep sending me messages. Look, here's a video of a Jew spitting on a Christian. You see what Jews do? This is how Jews treat Christians. And everything is the Jews. And look, here's what a 7th century rabbi said. You see what Jews believe? And the exact same people who told us over and over again, like a beating drum, don't associate what some people do or with what some leader at some point said. Don't associate that with all Muslims, are the exact same people to a man who will take anything about Jews and say, you see, this is what Jews do. This is who Jews are. This is how Jews treat people. Biggest bunch of hypocrites in the world. And I don't know a ton about her, but I would guess, Robert, based on the few things I've seen over the past several months, that Candace Owens is exactly the same way.
Yeah. David, I got to confess, I don't know a whole lot about her either. Of course, I've seen her name bandied about. I've seen her around. I met her once somewhere, some conference we were both speaking, and I really don't know much about her, but I do know that after October 7th, there was a great deal of... There were a great many people, let's say, who suddenly came out to be Jew haters, and she seems to have been one of them. One of the most astonishing things that she recently said that I wrote a column about a few weeks ago, and this is one of the first times that I actually took a lot of notice of her in what she was saying, is she said that the Nazis burned books. And everybody says, isn't it terrible that the Nazis burned books? But people don't realize that the Nazis were burning bad books by a Jew who was the father of the whole transgender business. And therefore, it wasn't so bad. We really got to see how these Nazis see. They really weren't so bad after all in this view. And so I thought, well, my goodness, that's astonishing. Because in the first place, she doesn't mention the fact that they burned a whole lot of very good books. Even if they burned some evil books, that doesn't mean that they were nice guys. And now we have this. My goodness. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, and this has the same kind of vibe to it, like everyone becoming fans of Hitler. Or, hey, maybe the Nazis weren't so bad after all. Has the same vibe as just a few months ago when everyone on TikTok, all these young people on TikTok started going, wow, Osama bin Laden was a good guy after all. We read his letter, and oh, wow, it's so good. Here's what's interesting, Robert, because in Osama bin Laden's letter that everyone became an instant fan of and became a new classic, he's couching everything in terms of things that the West has done to him and he's just reacting to. Now, you and I know exactly why that is. Most Muslims don't believe that since there's no caliphate, most Muslims don't believe that they are allowed to wage offensive jihad. And therefore, when you want to wage jihad against the United States or the UK or whoever, you have to show that it is defensive in nature and you're just reacting to what other people have done. So when he wants to defend attacks against the West, he has to prove that, oh, I'm just doing this because of things you guys have done. So he lists this specifically so that he can justify jihad in an atmosphere where he's not supposed to be waging offensive jihad. You need a caliph to do that. And so he's doing it just to justify going around and killing a bunch of people. But then people look at it and we've been so programmed that anyone who's a victim is automatically right that, oh, he's saying he's a victim. He's saying he's a victim, so he must be right. And morons on TikTok fall for it because they've been programmed. And my goodness, Robert, I mean, in the past 6 months, people have concluded that Hitler and Osama bin Laden were the good guys. That's the world we're living in now.
That is absolutely 100% true, because you're absolutely right. I was shocked the other day. I saw our friend Sneeko, who I had never heard of until you pointed him out. Sneeko is, what is he, an influencer? I don't know what you'd call this guy. But anyway, he's got a massive following.
He's a douche. He's a douche, Robert. A douche is the correct word.
700,000 followers on Twitter. And he's praising Hitler. I saw it the other day. He put up a picture of Hitler, wrote some favorable comment. And I understand these people. They think the elites who have run the world are running it into the ground, and there has to be an alternative. I'm quite sympathetic to that point of view, and I agree with it entirely. But the answer ain't Hitler and Osama bin Laden.
No, but you wonder how much worse things can get, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that right now we're seeing apologetics for Hitler and justifications for jihad. It's only a matter of time before we start to see more attacks, more virulent attacks in the United States, and then people right here saying, well, we had it coming. These people, they were right all along and we didn't know it, and so on.
Yeah, I'm wondering where you go from here. Like, hey, you know who's really cool? Judas.
Oh yeah,
Judas.
Oh, yeah.
He got a bad rap.
Pontius Pilate.
Yeah.
Yep.
Shame on all you haters of Pontius Pilate.
He washed his hands.
Maybe Satan is the real hero of everything. Bunch of morons, man.
That's it. All right, we got a few jihad stories here, David. A little bit of jihad here today. One thing is, there was a terrible incident of Islamophobia in a McDonald's. Doesn't specify where it was, but it was somewhere in the United States, that a woman went into McDonald's and ordered a sandwich and got it in a blue and white wrapper.
Is that a Jewish flag sandwich?
It was a Jewish flag sandwich, David. It was a Zionist McChicken.
Got it. It's kosher.
I tried to say it solemnly.
It's a kosher sandwich.
So she was enraged, and she said that this sandwich wrapper is endorsing the killing of Palestinian kids.
Yeah, it's a genocidal chicken sandwich there.
That's right, a genocidal chicken sandwich.
That chicken sandwich is literally ethnic cleansing.
That's right. And the best part is, in the video, she goes back into the McDonald's and asks, this poor kid who's working there, what does this resemble? And the guy says, this one, it's a McChicken wrapper. And she says, I mean, he doesn't understand the gravity of the crime here that has been committed. And so she says, but why is it blue and white? And he says, honestly, I don't know. And she says, I think you do know.
Yeah,
It's
like
in
this,
some...
like this, like this kid decided that, right? He decided what McDonald's is going to wrap sandwiches in. This guy is the decider of what McChickens get wrapped in.
Yeah, he's the corporate vice
This guy, this
president
guy,
for
this guy called
rappers.
up. This guy called up his boss and said, "Yo, Ronald, I want everything wrapped up in Israeli flats to piss people off."
That's it. So she says, I think you do know. This is in support of Israel. And he tries to reason with her, but there's no reasoning with this kind of thing. If you got people that are nuts, then they're nuts. All right, on a more serious note, we have in El Cajon, California, near San Diego, we have Muhammad Abdul Karim. And he had a dentist who was an Orthodox Jew, Dr. Benjamin Haruni. And he went in and shot him dead. And the story said that he was a disgruntled dental patient. A disgruntled dental patient. Now, David, I don't know if you have, but I've had dental work
Wait,
done in my
let,
lifetime.
wait. I have not. I have not investigated this story, Robert.
Yes.
I did see it. I did not study it. But let me get this straight. In the middle of this whole Israeli-Palestinian war, when people are screaming death to Israel and death to Jews, and Jews are committing genocide and so on, a Muslim went in and killed a Jew, and the conclusion is this guy didn't like the filling that he got?
Yeah, that was it. He was a disgruntled dental patient. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
I had dental work once, and the guy actually told me after 8 hours in that chair, 8 hours really. He says, "I'm sorry, I couldn't do it." Whatever it was he was trying to do, and I was not happy, but I did not murder him, David. It never even occurred to me to do so. In fact, I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't up to date. All right, we got in Greece. We have in Athens, in the middle of the street, a migrant, a Muslim migrant. Although it was noted in one of the reports from the Greek press that he was Iranian, and another report from another Greek paper that he was Iraqi. But in any case, a Muslim migrant stabbed a random woman to death on the street. And so that, we've seen that consistently, have we not? That there are random murders. That's just what ISIS and Al Qaeda have repeatedly called for on the streets of the West.
Well, there's one thing we can be thankful for about the story, and that's that at least in the past, Muslims have never done anything to Greece.
Never. Never. It's never happened that there have been any jihads in Greece. In point of fact, ladies and gentlemen, the modern nation of Greece was part of the Ottoman Empire for several hundred years, and the Christians there, which was the vast majority, virtually all of the population, were subjugated as dhimmis, had to pay the jizya, and accept all the discrimination that came with that status. They threw it off in 1821 and declared the independence of the modern state of Greece. But that is actually one of the highest things on the to-do list of the Turkish president Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who wants to restore the Ottoman Empire, and that involves destroying Greece. Anyway, shall we go along now? We got in Germany. We had a report of two girls sitting, and they're in a shelter, apparently a bus shelter, in a remote area, and a car pulls up to them, and the man demands their handbags, and he finds that they resist, these two 17-year-old girls, and then he stabs them brutally and flees in his car, which is apparently a very high-priced Mercedes. The man is described as being of North African appearance. That, I think, is sort
Gotta
of...
be a Mormon.
Yeah, well, sure, because it's very clear that there's a Mormon imperative to kill random people on the streets. Actually, of course, in point of fact, as I noted, Al Qaeda and ISIS have both, more than once, called for the killing of random people on the streets of Europe, as well as in America, but we don't see it so much in America. We have seen it on occasion. I expect we'll be seeing it more in the future. In Switzerland, there was a stabbing by a 15-year-old Muslim who screamed, "Death to the Jews," and stabbed an Orthodox Jew in Zurich. There is, of course, quite a bit of that, and here again, do we not see collective punishment? That, I mean, what does this man in Zurich have to do with what he's upset about in regard to Israel?
Maybe he was a dentist.
Yeah, that must be it. I hadn't thought of that. I think you got a very
My
good
goodness,
point there.
Robert. You got any
Orthodox Jewish dentists.
you got any you got any bad vibes about Ramadan coming up here?
Yeah, I do actually. In all seriousness, I do think it's going to be a rocky Ramadan. I hope we make it out of it, but it's very possible we could see a large scale attack like October 7th again in Israel or even in the United States. There's really nothing that would prevent it from happening here. It's just a matter of time.
You could have some sort of attack in Israel, but there were soldiers on basically every corner. So,
That's good.
yeah. Now the rest of the world has gone completely insane. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, I say Israel because actually I've got the story here somewhere that there was I believe it was Ghazi Hamad, but I don't have it in front of me. In any case, one of the high up Hamas guys was calling for another October 7th scale attack during this Ramadan. Now, whether they have the
Yeah.
means to pull that off, that's another matter.
Yeah, I don't think not from outside, like coming from definitely not from Gaza. Things not going well for them there, but you do have lots of people within Israel, and you've got the West Bank and so on. So, but yeah, Israel seemed really well. They seem to have taken the lesson from not being prepared last time to being massively prepared now.
Good. Very good to hear. I do know that, of course, there are people say Israel's an apartheid state, which is absolutely slander. It's a state where
Candace Owens says it.
yeah, there you go.
She thinks the Muslim quarter in Jerusalem is where Muslims are trapped and aren't allowed to leave. It sucks. Just so she knows, the old city of Jerusalem, Muslims are the majority population there. Even though you have four quarters, there's like 35,000 people there, or something like that. Muslims are like 23,000 people of this. So it's a Muslim. The old city is a Muslim majority city, but so you have four quarters. You have the Muslim quarter, and right beside that is the Christian quarter. Then below, south of the Muslim quarter is the Jewish quarter, and then there's the Armenian quarter. But we didn't get to do it because we were finding it. We had to figure out the exact spot. And by the time we did, we didn't have time to record it. But we were going to have AP stand on the corner of the Muslim quarter side, and then start talking about the apartheid state and how's he going to escape this prison and so on. And then just like walk across the street to the Jewish side and be like, oh, so. Yeah, guys my goodness, there are Muslims, Jews, and Christians walking all over the place, left and right. It's actually impressive how they're able to maintain that with Christians there,
Hmm.
Jews there, Muslims there, all living together in the same area of the same city. Massively impressive, and I don't know that that could be handled that well anywhere else in the world right now with the
Hmm.
kinds of tensions that they face. And instead of being praised for being able to keep the peace there, they're condemned as an apartheid state.
Yeah. And it should be noted that not far from there, of course, is the Temple Mount, the Western Wall, the place where the Jews pray at the holiest site in Judaism, that is the last remnant, a retaining wall of the Second Temple. And that while Jordan was in control of Jerusalem and that whole area, there were homes built up against the Western Wall. You can see it in old photographs that prevented the Jews from being able to approach it and pray. And so the Muslim Jordanians prevented the Jews from praying at their holy site. The Jews have never prevented the Muslims from praying on the Temple Mount at Al Aqsa Mosque or the Dome of the Rock.
Yeah,
But
and
for
in
Israel to be a
fact, in
part-time
fact,
state.
yeah, it's a rule. It's told to you when you go up there because people we are allowed to visit. People are allowed to go up. I mean, I recorded multiple videos up on the Temple Mount. But you're told when you go up there, hey, you can go up there, you can look around, you can take pictures. No praying, no singing, none of that. And so, I mean, think about this. This is I'm a Christian. I'm not allowed to say a prayer up there, and it's not like you would have to be in someone's face. The place is huge. I don't know how many people don't realize how massive it is up there. I mean, it's got to be the size of like 20 football fields. It's huge. But yeah, better not pray up there, and that's the rule
It's the
for
rule for Jews and
imposed
Christians. Muslims can pray
imposed
up there.
imposed by Muslims.
Yes. But the Israeli government respects it and forbids Jews from praying, as well as Christians, on the Temple Mount, while Muslims are free to come and go as they please, while the Jews can only go up there certain hours of the day. And the Jews can't pray there. They'll be arrested and taken off the air, away from the area, if they pray there, while the Muslims can pray there freely. People don't know these things.
And I have to say, everywhere we went, no matter where we went, there are Israelis constantly defending Islam from criticism. We even talk to families of hostages, and they're careful to say when they're talking about their relative being taken hostage and so on, how much they want their relative to be released, and they would say, "But we all understand this has nothing to do with Islam. Killing Jews and taking hostages, taking captives. We all understand that this has nothing to do with Islam." And me and AP are sitting there like, I mean, you don't want to. I mean, this is the family member of a hostage. You don't want to say you're wrong and stuff like that. But
They're wrong.
gosh, they really do not know what they're up against. Islam has made this about religion for 14 centuries, and they're bending over backwards to say that this has nothing to do with religion.
It's incredible to me the
So,
delusion.
so, so I have to say, and this was the conclusion me and AP drew. It's like, we kind of get it because you do have lots of Muslims who live there, and you don't want to, divide the country more than is necessary. But I'd say the rest of us in the world have our work cut out for us because if they just are not willing to criticize Islam, and again, I understand their reasons, and a lot of it they probably don't know. They're probably told all their lives that Islam is wonderful and tolerant stuff, just like lots of people in the West, and it's probably more so over there. But yeah, the task falls to us to kind of try and expose the religious nature of the Islamic hatred of Israel. It's just, I mean, what's amazing is with all the talk about apartheid and so on, how I mean the Israelis over there just do everything they can to defend Islam against criticism.
Sure, because they don't want to gain more charges about being Islamophobic and hateful and all those things. Those kinds of charges are weapons to intimidate people into thinking that they can't resist or oppose jihad violence, and they work very well. That's why they keep using them. All right, in Mozambique, David, in Mozambique, a lovely place, they are facing a worsening humanitarian crisis as jihad attacks displace thousands of Christians as well as Muslims who do not accept the authority of the Islamic State, ISIS. Bishop Antonio Julias of Mozambique says that hunger, thirst, and disease are posing imminent threats to the people who have fled. They have fled from villages that have been reduced to ashes. What are they trying to do in Mozambique? The jihadis, that is.
I don't know. Spread peace and tolerance and love like they always do.
Man. That's it. I don't know how you do it. Every time, you're right.
You know what we really need to do, Robert?
What's that?
Since the media will absolutely not report on any of these jihad attacks in Africa, these relentless ongoing attacks, these, let's face it, in places like Nigeria, genocides against Christians. Maybe we need to get some Jewish volunteers and have a Jew go over there and just make an appearance in northern Nigeria so that a Jew is somewhere in the picture, and then maybe they'll pay attention to it.
Yes, then they can blame the Jews, and then we'll finally get some attention.
Maybe people will try to stop it then. When it's
Yep.
Muslims killing Muslims, no one will even mention it. When it's Muslims killing Christians, won't even mention it. Toss one Jew into that mix, and suddenly it'll get international attention.
Yep, you're right. And also, it'd be a wonderful outreach, to show that Islam is a religion of peace. That if a visibly identifiable Jew showed up in a jihad-infested area of Nigeria, he'd be welcomed as a member of the people of the book, would he not?
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Okay, Stupid Infidels. It's Stupid Infidels time, ladies and gentlemen. We need a Stupid Infidels theme song. But in any case, I'll work on that. If you have suggestions, just put them in the chat. Okay, in the UK, David, this is Jeremy Hunt on the left, and he is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Treasurer for the government, and that's Sajid Javid on the right, who is a very prominent member of the Conservative Party, prominent politician. He's held various positions in the government in the recent past, but I don't think he has any now. In any case, I could be wrong about that. But Jeremy just announced this morning, or I guess it was this afternoon in Britain, he said that they were going to spend £1 million, which is $1,272,000, on a memorial for Muslim soldiers that they're going to construct there, probably in London. Muslim soldiers who served in the British forces during World War I and World War II. Now, obviously, this is going to bring peace and harmony to the various Muslim communities in Britain and end the jihad there, is it not?
Yeah, they always come up with plans for how this is going to melt people's hearts. And have you ever seen where anything like this actually works and makes any sort of significant, serious impact on anyone?
Never once.
No, it's all for show to make it look like, oh, we're making a difference, and it doesn't make a difference, and sorry, no one cares.
Indeed. So Jeremy Hunt, he said, the memorial will be a physical reminder of how people of all faiths make an impact working together and can continue to do so despite the challenges of those who attempt to divide our society. Now, it seems to me, David, that those who are attempting to divide our society are more often than not Muslims rather than non-Muslims. And that if non-Muslims point that out, then they're accused of attempting to divide the society. But really, the divisions are all coming from one direction.
Yeah, and think about the parallel. Think about the parallel here to what I was just mentioning earlier with you had the September 11th attacks, and for years, after every terrorist attack, every media show would have Muslims on their channel doing dawah because they wanted to show how not Islamophobic they are. And so, what do we do after a terrorist attack? Let's get a Muslim preacher on to explain how wonderful Islam is. But it's the same here. You've got the Dawa clowns, and they're screaming, "Ah, we're going to take over the country, take over the country, take over the country," and then, hey, let's build a monument to Muslims. So what's the takeaway message? The more you guys want to take over the country, the more we're going to honor you. Seriously? Yeah. And so, I mean, it's like, I mean, the message you're sending, the message that was sent back in the day, the more people you slaughter in the name of Allah, the more we will support and defend your religion. And here it's the more you guys want to take over and conquer the land and establish an Islamic state, the more we'll honor you, by golly.
That's so true. Not only is that so true, I got another story about it right now. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of Britain, there he is, old Rishi, he made a speech the other day. There he is, making his speech. And he said that he actually, I should explain, he was making the speech because there has been a recent phenomenon in Britain of MPs, members of parliament, being threatened by supporters of Hamas. The demonstrators in Britain who are against Israel and want the UK to condemn Israel, they have actually made MPs feel afraid because they're quite seriously trying to get the MPs to vote against supporting Israel. And they're trying to frighten and intimidate them into doing so. And so in response to this, Rishi Sunak made a major speech, and in it he said that he was going to fight against the Islamists and the far right. He had to throw the far right in there, David, and I was wondering, the far right didn't threaten anybody. The far right hasn't done a thing. The far right isn't out there climbing up on monuments and putting flags on Churchill or other British heroes. This kind of thing is only happening from the supporters of Hamas, the Muslims and their leftist allies, and yet he has to bring in the far right. And who's the far right? Well, it's us. It's anybody who opposes jihad violence.
Yeah, and you see this sort of thing over and over again. I just saw like Michael Moore recently. Israel, you shouldn't be worried about Hamas. You should be worried about white Christians. And it's always like, hey, don't worry about the guys who are actually attacking you and want to subjugate you and want to take over and reduce you to second-class citizenship and slaughter you and do all this other stuff. No, worried about these guys who aren't doing anything to you. Let's toss them in there because that's what we've been programmed to do because we're morons.
And that shows that we're not Islamophobic. And that's actually why they banned me and Pamela Geller from Britain, David, because they needed some opposites to the jihadis. And so Theresa May, when she was prime minister, she boasted that she'd expelled Abu Hamza and Abu Qatada, who were jihad terrorists, from Britain, and prevented me and Pamela from coming in. She was trying to create an equivalence between us and the terrorists, but it's completely bogus because we ain't terrorists.
Yeah, got all the extremists in one fell swoop. You got the guys who, want to slaughter soldiers and stuff, because that was what the whole thing was about, was the almost beheading of Lee Rigby. But you have the extremists. You have the people who want to slaughter unbelievers in the name of Allah, and then you have the people who oppose it. Those are your extremes.
Yeah, that's it. Those are the two sides that Britain's against. Those who are for jihad,
yeah,
and
Robert,
those who are against jihad.
Yeah, Robert, I mean, there are a couple issues here when things like this happen in Great Britain. I mean, on the one hand, you think, you don't want the Sharia files actually taking over, one of the great nations of history and so on. You don't want to see that. Then you have all the people there all the people who don't approve of what's going on, who don't want to be subjugated and so on, but are just like forced to keep their mouths shut or face terrible consequences. You don't want bad things to have to happen to them and so on. But as far as everyone else, all the enablers, all this time, it's almost like you guys are getting exactly what you deserve, exactly what you deserve. We told you and told you and told you and told you and told you, and you giant morons attacked us the entire time. And now you're going to be sniveling and whining as every single thing we told you was going to happen is happening right in your faces.
I can't say as I disagree. And here's another example of exactly the same phenomenon. Here's Salwan Momika, and he's holding up a Quran. Salwan Momika is an Iraqi a Christian. I don't know if he's still a practicing Christian, but in any case,
I think he's an atheist from a Christian background.
yeah, there you go. And Salwan Momika is a resident of Sweden at the moment, and he has gained quite a lot of controversy by burning the Quran on several occasions. And the Swedish government has now ordered him to be deported. They got lots of jihadis in Sweden, and they're fine. But he says this. He said this Friday, my extradition to Iraq means that Sweden will participate in my execution, and that it will be the turn of the rest of those who stand against the Islamization of the West. Is he right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how absolutely insane is this? You take a place like Sweden, and it's like, hey, all these guys from around the world who believe in killing apostates and people who believe in jihad and who actually want to conquer us by coming here and believe in subjugating non-Muslims and honor killings. We need as many people as possible who believe these things. But here you've got one guy who's against that, and he has to go. And not only does he have to go, we're going to send him back to be executed because we cannot tolerate this.
Yeah. And there's
People
just no
are these
doubt.
people are not. And by the way, it's the same thing. Once again, I know there are plenty of perfectly nice, reasonable people in Sweden and so on who don't approve and who are heartbroken over seeing what's happened to their country. But as for the enablers, it's just, oh, you guys are about to get what you deserve. You are absolute scum for doing this to your own people and your own country. And yep, there are certain people who no one's going to feel bad for when they are violently subjugated.
Yes, indeed. And here's some more. Let me get the picture here. Is that it? Yeah, there we go. This is Les Invalides, which is a church. I don't know if I've said it right. Probably not. It's a church in France. And it's got a cross on top, as churches often do. But the French are hosting the 2024 Olympic Games, and they made a poster for the games, and on the poster you see the church, but there ain't no cross on top. They took that off because it would offend. Who would it offend, do you think, David? Which group could it possibly offend?
Jews.
Jews have lived in Europe for centuries, crosses all over the place. They seem to have gotten along all right. They didn't, in other words, register offense at the sign of every cross.
Yeah, well, I mean, if there's one thing you can't tolerate on a Christian church, it's a cross.
Yes, because in Islam, of course, the cross is an abomination. Jesus did not die on a cross. Jesus is going to come back and break all the crosses. And so the cross is offensive to Muslims, and this is who the French are trying to appease. Meanwhile, in Germany, Ramadan's coming up. You mentioned that earlier, David. I should have mentioned this at that moment. I didn't think about it. This is Frankfurt, Germany. And you see the, whatever that is there, the cherry picker. Ha! And it's putting up the Happy Ramadan sign as Frankfurt becomes the first German city to put up signs all around the city celebrating Ramadan. Do you think that it's going to be the last German city to do that?
Nope. But here again, same situation over and over and over again. Plenty of awesome German people who don't approve of what's going on. And then there's the people who are doing this to themselves. And sorry, no tears will be shed for you.
Indeed. Meanwhile, also the Germans. This guy made a cartoon. I know I have it here. There it is. And his cartoon was an adaptation of a sexual harassment poster. But anyway, the point in this case is this: that when a Palestinian says, "I want to eradicate the Jews," leftists are fine with it. But when a Nazi says, "I want to eradicate the Jews," then it becomes this terrible thing. Now, the point was not
Very good
to
point.
say that the Nazis are good. The point was to say that the indignation should be just as great when Palestinians and their supporters say they want to eradicate the Jews, as in the case of the Nazis. But this guy has actually, he faces criminal proceedings, the guy who did that, in Germany. Because as it turns out, it's illegal in Germany to display the Nazi symbol. And you see that he put it in his cartoon because he put the Nazi flag there. And so for that, he is being prosecuted. Now, I just want to... what do you think, David? If he had been a supporter of Hamas and had replaced the Star of David on the Israeli flag with the Nazi symbol, do you think he would be prosecuted in Germany?
No, they'd have made him the new prime minister.
I suspect you're correct. I do think that that's very likely. That this kind of law, the law against displaying the Nazi symbol, is designed to prevent a reemergence of National Socialism. It's obviously not what this guy meant. And so to use it against him, it's very clear that they just don't like the double standard being pointed out. Meanwhile, I have another story from France. Okay, this one starts out like a joke, but it's got no punchline. A Muslim walks into a bar, and when he gets into the bar, he starts shouting a certain slogan that we all know and love. You probably can imagine what it is. And you're right. It is on the wheel of Allahu Akbar, and that's what he said. And he threatened to return with a machine gun and kill everybody in the bar. And so the French, they put him in a psych ward because they assume that if somebody wants to do something like that, he must be crazy. What is another alternative? What do you think, David?
He believes in the teachings of Muhammad.
That, I think, is a very real possibility. He might not be crazy at all, but because...
Yeah, and yeah, this goes back to something we've said many times before. This is also the result of politicians and journalists constantly saying that Islam's a religion of peace and tolerance, and it's so clear, and them completely butchering verses of the Quran to make them sound peaceful and tolerant. And then they convince entire populations that Islam is so peaceful and tolerant that the only possible explanation for someone interpreting Islam as violent is absolute. They would have to be insane. If it's that clear, I mean, that's how you test people for insane. You put something obvious in front of them, they see something completely different. You'd have to be insane. Well, if all you're confronted with is peace and tolerance, peace and tolerance, peace and tolerance, and you conclude, oh, I have to go kill people, you have to be insane.
That's it. There's really no other alternative. And so they're loading up the psych wards with jihadis. And I don't know what's going to be the outcome of that, but I don't think it's going to be good. Meanwhile, the New York Department of Education, David, the New York City Department of Education has weighed in with a teaching about jihad, which I thought was interesting.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's about time.
they're giving training sessions for teachers to understand and combat Islamophobia. And so in these in the in these training sessions for teachers, they tell them that jihad means struggle, striving in the path of Allah, and they even resurrect the old Care My Jihad campaign. You know, my jihad is not judging people by their cover. My jihad is building friendships. My jihad is never settling for anything less than my best effort. And they say it has nothing to do with warfare.
Yeah, so I guess Muhammad really screwed that one up because he said the best jihad is the one where you get really violent. We need to get a hold of that curriculum, Robert, and you could do some interesting responses to that.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Let me see. It was a story in the Jewish Chronicle, and maybe I'll be able to track it down if I follow along. I'll let you know. But yeah, I'm sure that you would agree that you and I would do it. Teach them all about jihad. Hold the training sessions at our own expense. No charge to the city. But I imagine that they've got care people and all sorts of other sophisticated deceivers, and thus they're going to get lied to. And they want to get lied to. That's really what it's all about. Okay, this is somebody you may be familiar with. I'd never heard of him until I saw this story. This is Royce Gracie. Do you know this guy?
Hoyce.
Hoyce?
The R is pronounced like an H. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is he Brazilian?
Yep. Yeah, he's one of the pioneers of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His whole
like
family,
that?
the Gracie family.
Yeah,
you've
I
heard
was
of
in
like
Brazil
the
years
ultimate.
ago. Yeah, I've heard of it. I don't know
Yeah.
anything about it.
No, I mean you've heard of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, right?
I've heard of it, yeah, but that's it.
The UFC. Yeah, the Gracie families started that, and he won, I believe, the first two Ultimate Fighting Championships. Back then, it was they would put one martial art against another, so it would be karate versus jujitsu or boxing versus jujitsu and so on. And it was meant as an exhibition for Brazilian jiu-jitsu to show that one-on-one they could defeat any other martial art, and they did. But what happened was everyone started learning Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and then you ended up with mixed martial arts, and that's what really. I mean, there were people who did multiple martial arts back then, but that's what started the craze of learning mixed martial arts. So yeah, he's one of the pioneers, and exactly one of the guys who would be targeted for Dawa because they really are obsessed with getting anyone famous.
Yeah, and especially apparently these famous sports guys. Yeah, I was in Brazil about 20 years ago for quite some time, and I remember that there were all sorts of words that started with an R that they would pronounce with an H, and I didn't ever learn exactly how the rule worked for that. But in any case, did you hear about this story, David?
Yeah, I heard. Yeah, it's all over. Yeah, Muslims are shouting it from the rooftops. So they've
Yeah.
got first they had Andrew Tate, then they had Sneeko, now they got Hoist Gracie.
But he does.
So
It's not altogether clear that he did convert. Apparently, he was
well,
on the Dean show.
I've seen people claiming it.
Yeah, well, I had a guy, one of the guys who's a writer at Jihad Watch wrote the story, and he saw it all. I'm not familiar with it, but apparently you can see the Dean Show logo, and he was on with Eddie and Sheikh Uthman, your friend from the fake stabbing, and they were talking
Wait,
to
you mean the same? Wait, just to be clear, you mean the same Sheikh Uthman who faked a hate crime against himself,
yeah,
blamed
that's the guy.
us, and then made all kinds of lies, and then when his friend sent his wife to him for marital counseling, he banged his wife and then married her, even though she was already married to the other guy. That Sheikh Uthman?
Yikes! I hadn't heard about that part. Yeah, that's the guy. So he's on the Dean Show with Eddie and with this Gracie, and Gracie was talking. He was on because he had expressed sympathy for Israel after October 7th, and then he got inundated with death threats, And apparently, at least according to the story I've got here, that they tell him that to become a Muslim, you say this, and he said this, but it's not clear that he was just whether he was actually becoming a Muslim or just agreeing that this is what you say in order to do so. And it was very clear that what he wanted was to end the death threats that he was getting because of expressing sympathy for the Israelis. I don't know. But certainly intimidation and manipulation are very strong elements of dawah, whatever may be happening in this particular case.
Yeah, by the way, that happened with Salman Rushdie. After he had a brief period where he thought he could convert to Islam, and that would rescue him, but he found out that didn't work.
Yeah, because there's no forgiveness. He still had committed blasphemy, so he'd have to be put to death even as a Muslim for his blasphemy. So I think he gave up that tactic. Anyway, this is Charlotte Church, who is some kind of a singer, apparently. And Charlotte Church
No idea.
was leading the chant at her concert, "From the River to the Sea, Palestine will be free." And when she was criticized, she said she had no idea that it was anti-Semitic and did not think that it was anti-Semitic at all. She said, "I stand by everything that we sang. It was really beautiful."
Yet, to be fair, most of the people chanting it have no clue what they're doing. They're just mindless drones who do whatever is popular with whatever group they're in.
Indeed. And so Charlotte Church is certainly one of those. But she also did seem to be a little bit more propagandized than most, because she said, "This is about the slaughter of tens of thousands of innocent people, the slaughter of children. What is happening in Gaza is a hell on earth." Now, it's important to note that as common as these charges are, and as oft repeated as they are, the source for those claims is Hamas. The Gaza Ministry of Health is controlled by Hamas, and they are the whole, sole, only source for any claims that Israel is committing any kind of atrocities. Meanwhile, John Spencer, who is no relation, who is a professor at West Point, went to Israel, and he said that Israel is more scrupulous in avoiding civilian casualties than any military force on earth.
I mean, we just have to ask, why is anything happening in Gaza right now?
That's another question. Yes.
What's the cause? What's the cause of that?
Good question, David. That's very.
What's the reason? What's the reason? I mean, could it have something to do with all the terrorists who crossed the border, slaughtered a ton of people, then went and hid among the civilians and so on with a bunch of hostages?
I think you may have a point there. I don't know, but I think you might have a point there. All right, one other thing here. This is the Ikra bookstore in Nice, in France, which is a very nice town. And it's an Islamic bookstore, and it's been shut down now because it was found to be selling books calling for the murder of homosexuals and justifying violence against women. And so, David, it has been closed for 3 months. So let's see.
Like what? Just to be clear, what Islamic bookstore would not contain those books?
Indeed. And what are the chances that when it reopens, let's see, April, May, June, when it reopens in June or July, what are the chances that it's going to be not teaching those things?
No, of course. They might have to make it less obvious, but that's about it.
Indeed. The thing is, the French authorities, just like authorities all over the West, they have no idea what Islam really teaches, and they assume that these things are isolated incidents that don't have anything to do with real Islam. And so they assume, oh, this is an aberration. They'll clean up their shelves. They'll open again. They'll be loyal, stable citizens of the secular state. They're in for, like so many people, a rude awakening. Meanwhile, in France,
Yep.
You see this? This is a castle. It's a castle with a French name. I'm not even gonna try. Anyway, it's a castle now that is being filled with migrants from East Africa. And so they're getting the royal treatment in France, and I think that's altogether fitting and proper because they are the new masters of the land.
Yeah, man. All the way things are going, the way things are going in all these countries, these guys got me wanting to like just cross the border and
It's
live the
true.
life, man.
It's true. We could go and take a boat and land in France, and we'd get put up in a castle. We'd live like kings.
Nice.
Everything
Darn
provided
right.
by the state. It's going to be great.
That's the life.
Well, until
Yeah,
then,
that
ladies and
and
gentlemen.
this.
Yes?
Oh, I was just gonna say. I mean, easy to keep that up for indefinitely. I'm guessing.
Yeah, yeah. They're never going to, the money will never run out. The castles will never run out. And they're going to march together. They're going to lock arms and march together into the glorious multicultural future. There may be a few hiccups along the way, however, and so we are likely to be back in a future at a future date. I'm on the road next week. I think I'm going to be hurtling through the air at this time. But in any case, we'll be back as soon as possible, with more jihad. And until then, as always, pray hope and don't worry.